No one wanted the half-starved Vulpine slave, so I said her Fredo subside let's go. The market was quiet in the early morning, but not the kind of quiet that made someone feel safe or calm. It was the quiet of waiting, the kind that comes when the sun barely touches the dusty ground, and the first few people began to move among the rows of old stalls. The man walked slowly, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. He had been coming to this market for many years, but today was different. Today he wasn't here for the usual trade, the usual noises, the usual faces that shouted to sell or buy. Today he was here to see something no one else seemed to notice. The market was filled with people, but only the usual ones were getting attention. Farmers with tired hands, merchants with worn faces, and a few travelers who looked out of place. They all moved quickly, talking loudly, making deals that mattered to them. But among the crowd, there was a girl who barely moved at all. She was not tall, not strong, and not like the others. She crouched near the edge of a stall, her head hanging low, her small hands clutching a thin piece of cloth that barely covered her. Her ears twitched at every sound, and her golden eyes, soft but alert, looked around as if expecting danger at every corner. Most people passed by without noticing her at all. Those who did notice turned away quickly, pretending she didn't exist. They whispered, laughed quietly, or shook their heads. No one stopped to ask her name or how she came to be there. The man paused for a moment, looking at her. He did not see just a poor, small, strange girl. He saw someone who had been hurt, someone who had been left behind. Her coat was torn, her clothes smelled of sweat and dust, and her hair was tangled and unkempt. He noticed the way her ribs showed through the thin fabric of her shirt, the way her legs trembled slightly when she shifted her weight. Hunger had carved itself into her small frame, leaving her looking weaker than a child half her age. But it was not just her body that was broken. It was the look in her eyes. It was a quiet, dull fear, like she had been waiting for something terrible for a very long time. And she expected it to happen any second. The man's heart tightened. He had seen suffering before, but this was different. There was something about her that made the world seem unfair in a new way. No one wanted her. No one cared for her. She was left alone, a small shadow at the corner of a busy market, forgotten while the rest of the world went on. People passed her by as if she were nothing. And the way they ignored her made him angry, though he did not show it. It made him sad too. Deep down, he knew that this was not her fault. She had not done anything wrong to deserve being ignored, being hungry, being left to survive on scraps. He walked closer, careful not to scare her. Most people, he knew, would act quickly, either to take advantage of her or simply to look at her for a moment and then move on. But he wanted to understand her. He watched her for a long time, noticing small details that no one else would care about. The way her tail curled slightly around her legs when she sat, the way she blinked quickly at loud noises, the way she flinched whenever someone came too close. It was clear she had learned to protect herself by being invisible, by staying quiet, by moving slowly. A few children ran past, laughing and playing with simple wooden toys. She watched them from the corner of her eyes, a flicker of longing in her gaze. She wanted to join them, but she stayed crouched and small. Perhaps she had learned long ago that no one would invite her to play, that she would only be pushed away. The man noticed this. He had seen fear before, and he had seen hunger. But he had rarely seen a combination of both so strong, so clear in one person. He remembered when he was younger, walking through crowded streets in a city that did not care about the small or the weak. He remembered the faces of people who were hungry, cold, and alone. But this girl was different. She had not only survived hunger and fear, she had survived being treated as if she did not matter at all. She had learned to hide in plain sight, and somehow she was still alive. That thought made the man's chest tighten even more. How could anyone ignore someone like her? He moved a little closer and kneeled down, putting himself at her level. He did not speak at first. He did not want to frighten her. He just looked at her, really looked at her. Slowly, she raised her head, her golden eyes meeting his. There was a flicker of surprise there, quickly replaced by caution. She did not speak. Her voice, if she had one, was silent for now. But the man could see her story written in her eyes, the fear, the hunger, the pain, the loneliness. The sun rose higher, casting a warm light over the dusty market, but it did not seem to reach her. Her small frame shivered slightly in the morning air, and the man realized she was not only hungry, but cold as well. He had seen markets in many towns, and he knew that some people brought blankets, food, or water for stray animals or poor children. But this girl was neither an animal nor a child in their eyes. She was something they did not understand, something they ignored because they did not want to take responsibility. That realization made him feel both sorrow and determination. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread he had brought for himself. He tore it in half and held it out, careful not to make sudden movements. The girl flinched, but did not move away. Her eyes followed the bread, the small offering, and for a moment he saw a change in her. There was curiosity mixed with fear, a small spark that had been hidden under layers of survival. Slowly, very slowly, she reached out with one trembling hand and took the bread. She did not eat it immediately. She held it close, like it was a treasure, like it was a sign that someone, just one person, had noticed her and cared. The man smiled softly, though quietly. He understood that trust would not come easily. She had been ignored, abandoned, and treated poorly for too long to trust anyone immediately. But the small gesture of sharing bread was a start. It was a start that showed her she was seen, that she mattered. Even if just for a moment the crowd moved around them, busy and unaware. Merchants shouted prices, travelers bargained for goods, children ran laughing between stalls. But for that small moment, the man and the girl existed in their own quiet world. He stayed kneeling, patient, letting her take the lead. She took a small bite of the bread, her ears twitching at every sound. She ate slowly, as if afraid the food would disappear, as if it was a gift she did not deserve. When she finished, she looked up at him again. This time, there was a small flicker of something else in her eyes, a question, perhaps, or a tiny hope. She did not speak, but he understood. He would not leave. He would not ignore her like everyone else. And though she could not yet know it, her life was about to change. Starting from this quiet morning in a dusty, busy market, the man stood slowly, still watching her. He knew that this was only the beginning. He did not know what challenges lay ahead, but he was certain of one thing. He could not walk away. Not now. Not after seeing her like this. Not after realizing that no one else had cared enough to even notice. And as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the market, the man made a silent promise. He would help her. He would see that she was safe, fed, and treated like a human being. Not a shadow or a burden, for the first time in a long while. The Vulpine girl allowed herself a small thought. Maybe, just maybe, someone cared. And that thought, fragile and new, was enough to keep her alive for now. The morning passed slowly. The man stayed near the edge of the market, keeping a quiet watch over the Vulpine girl. She moved cautiously now, no longer crouching in the corner like before, but still unsure of the world around her. Every noise, every shadow, made her ears twitch. She had lived too long in fear to let herself relax completely. But the small piece of bread had given her courage, and she took small steps, testing him, testing herself. The man knew that trust could not be forced. It had to grow slowly, like a plant emerging from the soil after a long winter, as the day went on. The man tried to learn more about her. He listened to whispers from merchants and travelers, though most of the stories were confusing or incomplete. Some spoke of a girl who had been sold and traded many times, moving from place to place, like a forgotten object. Others mentioned a small figure that had been seen wandering the outskirts of town, searching for scraps to eat. Pieces of her past began to emerge, though each piece seemed more tragic than the last. She had been treated as property, not as a living being. She had been forced to work, forced to obey, forced to survive in ways most people could not imagine. The man could feel his chest tighten as he learned more. It was hard to believe someone so young, so small, could have experienced so much suffering. The girl herself said very little. She spoke in soft, hesitant words when she had to, and often just shook her head or looked away when questions came. It was clear she had learned early on that speaking too much could bring punishment. The man understood that. He did not press her for answers. He simply stayed near, offering small gestures of kindness, a sip of water, a warm blanket, a gentle smile. Each of these gestures was new to her. Each one slowly chipped away at the fear that had hardened her for so long. He noticed the way she moved, how careful she was with her steps, how she seemed to listen to every sound around her. She had learned to survive in a world that did not care for her. But he also noticed the way her eyes sometimes softened when she looked at the sky, the way she occasionally watched children play without moving away completely. There was a part of her that still remembered what it was like to feel hope, to dream, to imagine a life that was not filled with hunger and fear. And that part, though small and fragile, is the part he wanted to protect. By the afternoon, he decided to follow her quietly when she left the market. She wandered slowly toward the outskirts of the town, moving with a mixture of caution and curiosity. Her small paws barely made a sound on the dusty ground, and her tail twitched nervously at every passing sound. The man stayed hidden, careful not to startle her, but close enough to make sure she was safe. He could see the fatigue in her movements, the way her shoulders slumped from hunger and exhaustion. Yet, despite everything, she kept moving forward. There was a quiet determination in her that he admired, survival instinct that had carried her this far. Finally, she stopped near a small abandoned shed. The wood was old and cracked, and the door hung loosely on its hinges. Inside it smelled of dust and old hay, but it was dry and offered some shelter from the harsh sun. She stepped inside cautiously, sniffing the air and listening for any signs of danger. The man watched from a distance, noting how she carefully inspected every corner before settling down. It was clear she had learned to be careful, to check for threats before allowing herself even a moment of rest. He realized that this caution had probably saved her life more than once. The man could not imagine the loneliness she must have felt in a place like this. No one had come to check on her, no one had offered food or water, and no one had shown even the smallest kindness. She had been left to survive on her own, and that survival had made her strong in ways most people could not understand. Yet he could also see how fragile she was, how much she needed care and attention. It was a delicate balance. She was strong enough to survive, but not strong enough to heal without help. He thought about what he could do for her. He knew that giving her food, water, and shelter was only the beginning. She needed something more, something that could help her feel safe, something that could help her trust again. But he also knew that this would take time. She had been hurt too many times, and healing could not be rushed. It had to happen slowly, gently, and with patience. The man made a silent promise to himself. He would be patient. He would not force her to move faster than she was ready. He would be there for her, no matter how long it took. As evening approached, he finally decided to approach her. He did so slowly, speaking in a soft, calm voice. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl froze, her ears flattening against her head. Her eyes widened as she tried to gauge whether his words were true. She had been lied to so many times before, had been promised safety only to be betrayed, that trusting anyone now was nearly impossible. But there was something in his voice, something steady and gentle, that made her hesitate instead of fleeing. He knelt a little distance away from her, not making any sudden movements. He placed a small bag of food on the ground between them and stepped back slightly. "You can eat if you want," he said. "I'm not going to take it from you." The girl looked at the bag, then at him, and back at the bag again. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but fear held her in place. Slowly, cautiously, she crept forward and sniffed the food. It smelled different from the scraps she usually found, warmer, safer. She took a small piece in her paw and nibbled carefully, keeping her eyes on him the entire time. The man smiled softly, understanding that this was a small but important step. Trust could begin with something as simple as sharing a meal. After she finished, she looked up at him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The man did not speak immediately. He wanted her to feel that he would not overwhelm her with questions or demands. Instead, he waited, letting her set the pace. She shifted slightly, then curled up near the edge of the shed, her tail wrapped around her for comfort. It was not much, but it was enough for now. It was enough for her to begin feeling that the world could be safe, that someone could care about her. As night fell, the man realized that he needed to leave for a while. He could not stay forever, but he could return. He wanted her to know that he would not disappear after giving her kindness. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said softly. "You're not alone." The girl tilted her head, ears twitching, as if trying to understand. She did not speak, but the small flicker of understanding in her eyes told him that she had heard him. And perhaps she believed him at least a little. He walked away slowly, keeping her in sight until she disappeared into the shadows of the shed. His mind was heavy with thoughts of her past, her pain, and her resilience. He thought about the many times she had been passed from one place to another, never treated as a person, never given a chance to live as herself. And yet here she was, alive, cautious but surviving. That survival, he realized, was a strength that most people would never understand. And it was a strength he intended to protect, to nurture, to respect. The man's steps were slow as he left the market behind. He thought about the day ahead, about what he could do to help her recover. He knew it would not be easy, and he knew that the road ahead would be long. But he also knew that this small, fragile creature deserved a real chance to live, to grow, and to trust again. And he was determined to give it to her, no matter how long it took. The Vulpine girl, meanwhile, lay quietly in the shed, chewing the last small piece of food. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of calm, a small relief that someone had noticed her and cared. The world outside was still harsh and unforgiving, but for a moment, it seemed possible that there could be something better. She did not yet understand what it meant to be free, to be safe, to be treated like a human being and not property, but the seed of hope had been planted. And as she closed her eyes, letting herself rest, she dreamed not of fear or hunger, but of a world where she could belong, where she could live without running or hiding. And in that small, quiet moment, both the man and the girl knew that this was only the beginning of something larger, something that could change her life forever. The next morning, the man returned to the small shed at the edge of the town, just as he had promised. The sun was rising slowly, casting a golden glow over the dusty ground, and the market was beginning to come alive with the usual sounds of merchants calling out prices, carts rolling over uneven stones, and children laughing in the distance. But the man was not here for the market, nor for the usual noise and activity. He was here for the Vulpine girl, the fragile figure who had captured his attention the day before as he approached. He saw her sitting near the edge of the shed, her tail wrapped around her small body for comfort. Her ears twitched at the sound of his footsteps, but she did not run. She looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and caution, her golden eyes reflecting the morning light. The man stopped a few feet away, kneeling as he had done yesterday. He did not speak immediately, letting her observe him, letting her decide for herself if he could be trusted. Trust, he knew, could not be demanded or rushed. It had to be earned slowly, carefully, and with patience. After a few moments of silence, he reached into his bag and pulled out some food, placing it gently on the ground near her. He spoke softly. "You don't have to be afraid. You can eat as much as you want." She tilted her head, ears twitching nervously, but hunger was stronger than fear this time. She stepped forward, sniffing the food cautiously before taking a small bite. The man watched quietly, careful not to startle her. This small act of sharing food, simple as it was more than a gesture. It was a beginning. It was the first real proof that someone could care for her without expecting anything in return. After she finished eating, the man finally spoke more fully. "I have been thinking about you," he said gently, "about how you came to be here and how no one has treated you like you matter. I want to help you, if you will let me." The girl's eyes widened slightly, but she did not move closer. She had been promised help many times before, and each time it ended in disappointment or betrayal. Yet something in the way he spoke, the way he knelt calmly and looked at her without judgment, made her pause. She had learned to survive on her own, but she also knew that she could not keep going like this forever. the man continued, speaking slowly and clearly. I know no one has wanted you. No one has cared. But I want to change that. I cannot make the world better all at once, but I can start with you. You do not have to be alone anymore. You do not have to be afraid all the time. The girl listened, her body tense, but her ears relaxed slightly. She did not fully understand what he meant yet. But there was a small hope growing inside her, hope that she had almost forgotten existed. He paused and looked around the shed, noticing the small details of her life here. The corners were dusty and cold, the floor hard, and the shelter barely protected her from the weather. She had been making do with what little she had, surviving each day with scraps and shadows. The man felt a mixture of anger and sadness as he realized how little she had been given. No one had thought to care for her, to offer her comfort or safety. And yet she had survived. That survival was not just luck, it was her strength, her determination, and her will to live. I can give you a place to stay, he said finally. A proper place, warm and safe, where you can rest, eat, and not have to worry every moment. You do not have to work for anyone, and you do not have to hide. He waited, giving her time to consider his words. She shifted slightly, her tail curling tighter around her. She had never heard such words spoken to her before. They sounded strange, almost unreal. But they were kind, and in that kindness, there was a promise she wanted to believe in. Even if only a little. For several minutes, the girl said nothing. She simply looked at him, listening, watching, trying to measure whether she could trust him. The man did not press her. He understood that trust was not given freely to someone who had been hurt so many times. It had to be earned, slowly, with actions, and not just words. He waited patiently, letting her make the first move. Finally, she took a small step forward, her ears twitching nervously. She sniffed the air near him, then looked at the bag of food he had brought. It was not a bold action, not a sudden leap of trust, but it was a step. And to the man, it was enough. You do not have to decide everything right now, he said softly. One step at a time is enough. We can go slowly, together. She blinked, her golden eyes reflecting the morning light, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine something different to life, where she was not alone, where someone cared for her, where she did not have to survive constantly in fear. The man waited until the market began to quiet down slightly, until the sun was higher in the sky and the heat had softened the edges of the morning. He spoke again, this time more firmly, though still gently. I can take you from here. You do not have to stay in this shed anymore. You do not have to live like this. The girl froze. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to hide, to distrust him as she always had. But there was something in his eyes, a calm determination, a promise he would not break, that made her hesitate. For the first time, she considered that maybe, just maybe, this man was different. He reached out his hands slowly, carefully, showing her that it was safe. I am not going to hurt you. I just want to help. She looked at his hand, then at his face, then back at the shed. This place had been her shelter for so long, even though it was harsh and unforgiving. Leaving it was terrifying. But staying meant continuing the life she had grown to hate, the life of hunger, fear, and loneliness. Her small body shivered, but not entirely from cold. It was the fear of stepping into the unknown, of trusting someone again. Finally, she took a tentative step forward. Her paw touched the ground outside the shed, and then another, bringing her closer to him. He did not rush her, did not pull her forward. He simply knelt there, patient, letting her decide the pace. And then finally, she looked up at him. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, caution, yes, but also curiosity and hope. I don't know, she whispered, her voice soft, barely audible. She had never spoken words like this before. Usually she remained silent, hidden, invisible. But today, she had spoken. The man nodded gently. You do not have to know everything. You only have to know that I will help you. That is enough for now. He extended his hand again, a silent offer of trust, of safety, of a chance to be free. The girl looked at it, then back at him, and slowly, very slowly, She reached out. Her small paw touched his hand for the first time, a small connection that carried more weight than words could express. It was the beginning of something new, the first step toward freedom, and the first time she allowed herself to believe in kindness. Together, they left the shed. The man walked slowly, giving her time to adjust, to understand that the world outside could be safe, that not everyone was cruel. She stayed close, her ears alert, her eyes scanning the surroundings, but her steps were steady. The sun shone warmly on them, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel completely alone. The streets, which had always been harsh and unforgiving, seemed slightly less frightening with him by her side, as they walked toward a safe place he had prepared. The man thought about the journey ahead. He knew that simply leaving the shed was only the beginning. She would need food, shelter, care, and most importantly, patience. Healing would take time, and there would be moments of fear and doubt. But he also knew that every small step mattered. Every moment she felt safe and cared for would help her rebuild a life that had been broken for so long. For the girl, each step was heavy with emotion. Fear, hope, and uncertainty all mingled together as she moved forward. She did not know where this path would lead, but for the first time, she felt a small spark of possibility. Life beyond fear. A life where she could exist as more than a shadow. The man had given her something that no one else ever had, a choice. And with that choice came a new beginning, fragile and uncertain, but real and full of potential. By the time the sun reached its highest point, they had reached a small, safe house on the outskirts of town. It was simple but warm and welcoming. The man opened the door and gestured for her to enter. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, her ears flicking nervously. The house smelled of clean air and warmth, nothing like the cold, dusty shed she had called home. For the first time in her life, she felt she could rest, even just a little. The man smiled softly. "You are free now," he said. The words hung in the air, simple but powerful. She looked up at him, her golden eyes wide, as if trying to understand. Free. She had never heard that word spoken to her, never believed it could apply to her. And yet, standing here inside a safe place, with someone who cared, she felt it. Free. It was the beginning of a new life, one she could not yet imagine fully, but one she could hope for. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream not of survival, but of living. The first few days in the small safe house were quiet, almost too quiet for the Vulpine girl. The world outside had always been loud with the sounds of the market, shouts of merchants, the clatter of carts, and the occasional laughter of children. But here, inside the small home the man had prepared for her, there was only calm. The silence was strange and almost unsettling at first. She was not used to quiet that did not signal danger, quiet that did not hide harsh words or threats. She moved cautiously, sniffing the corners, lifting her paws lightly over the floor and flicking her ears at every sound. The man watched her carefully. Understanding that these first moments of freedom could be overwhelming, he did not force her to explore, did not demand that she relax or speak. He simply provided what she needed most: food, water, warmth, and the knowledge that she was safe. The house was small but comfortable, with soft bedding, clean water, and bowls filled with food that she had not known existed. There were no chains, no doors locked from the inside, no harsh voices commanding her to work or obey. For the first time, she had a choice. The first meal she had in the house was eaten slowly. She sniffed the food, touched it carefully with her paws, and only then took a small bite. Hunger had always made her eat quickly, without thought or care, but here she could eat slowly, savoring each piece. The man sat quietly nearby, allowing her to eat in peace, but he kept a careful watch. He knew that trust could be fragile, and that even small moments of fear could undo days of progress. By not hovering too closely, he gave her space, and by staying close enough to help, he offered safety. After the meal, she curled up near the corner of the room, her tail wrapped tightly around her. She was not fully comfortable yet, not fully relaxed, but she did not run or hide as she had in the shed. The man approached slowly and sat a few feet away. "You don't have to do anything," he said gently. "Just rest. You are safe here." She listened, her golden eyes following his every movement, as if trying to see if he could be trusted completely. Slowly, a small flicker of understanding crossed her face. This man was not like the others. He had given her freedom, and he was not taking it back. The days passed slowly, but each one brought small victories. She learned that she could eat without fear, she could sleep without watching every corner for danger, that she could move freely without the threat of punishment. She began to explore the house, cautiously at first, sniffing each corner, testing the doors, and occasionally venturing outside into the small yard. The world outside was still bright and overwhelming, filled with sounds and smells she had almost forgotten. But here, she was free to experience it at her own pace, and that freedom, though strange and new, was exhilarating. The man introduced small routines to help her regain strength and confidence. He encouraged her to eat at regular times, to rest when tired, and to play in small ways. At first, she was hesitant. Play had been a dangerous thing in her past, a distraction that could get her punished or neglected. But slowly, she began to chase a small ball he rolled across the floor, to bat at strings of cloth, and even to listen to his voice telling her stories of the world outside the town. Each small game, each gentle story, was a reminder that life could be more than survival. Life could be lived with joy, curiosity, and safety. Even as she began to relax, there were moments of hesitation. Sometimes a sound outside, a loud shout, a cartwheel, a barking dog would make her ears flatten and her body stiffen. Sometimes the thought that someone could take her freedom away again would make her retreat to a corner. But each time the man was there. He would speak softly, touch her gently on the shoulder, and wait until she understood that the danger had passed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, she began to believe that she could trust him completely. One afternoon, the man brought her to the market again, but this time it was different. He did not leave her among strangers or force her to interact with anyone. Instead, he walked slowly beside her, holding a small basket of food and showing her how to move safely among the crowd. She stayed close to him, ears alert but did not cower. The people in the market looked at her with curiosity, some even with surprise, but none spoke harshly or tried to take advantage of her. She began to realize that the world could be safe, that there were kind people beyond the walls of her small home. Back at the house, she began to show small signs of personality and independence. She explored the rooms without fear, arranged her bedding, and even began to make small plans for herself. The man encouraged her to express herself, to ask for what she wanted, and to make choices. This was new to her. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. No one had ever treated her as if her thoughts and feelings mattered. Slowly, she began to understand that freedom was more than just the absence of chains. It was the right to make choices, the ability to move safely, and the knowledge that she was valued as a living being. The man also introduced her to small responsibilities, things that helped her feel capable and confident. She helped clean the house, water the small garden outside, and prepare meals. These tasks were not forced or overwhelming. They were shared, and she began to feel pride in what she could accomplish. Each task completed was a small victory, a reminder that she could live independently, that she could contribute to her own well-being without fear. Over time, the girl began to speak more. Her voice, soft and hesitant at first, grew stronger with each passing day. She asked questions about the world, about the people in the town, and about the man who had given her this life. He answered patiently, never rushing her, never dismissing her thoughts. She began to understand that speaking, sharing, and expressing herself was safe, that her voice mattered, that she could exist in the world without being afraid. The man also helped her understand her past, not to dwell on it, but to give it context. He listened patiently as she recounted fragments of her memories, times of hunger, fear, and neglect. He did not judge her or the people who had hurt her. He simply acknowledged her pain and reminded her that those experiences did not define her future. Slowly, she began to see that her past, though difficult, had made her strong. But it did not have to limit her. She could create a new life, one filled with safety, care, the freedom to grow. One evening, As the sun set and the sky turned a soft orange, the girl sat by the window, watching the world outside. She felt a calm she had never known before. The wind brushed against her fur, carrying the smells of the town, the trees, and the distant fields. She felt alive in a way she had never imagined. The man sat nearby, quietly reading, and she realized something remarkable. She could simply exist without fear. She could rest, play, eat, and explore without the constant worry of being harmed or abandoned. Freedom, she realized, was more than a word. It was a feeling. The days turned into weeks, and with each day, the girl grew stronger, healthier, and more confident. She learned the small joys of life, the taste of fresh food, the warmth of sunlight on her fur, the comfort of soft bedding, and the pleasure of human kindness. She began to trust not only the man, but the world itself. She discovered that life could be beautiful, that people could be kind, and that she could belong somewhere. By the time a full month had passed, the girl had changed in ways that were remarkable. She walked taller, moved with more confidence, and even smiled, something she had rarely done before. She played freely, laughed softly, and spoke her mind. She had begun to understand what freedom truly meant, not only the absence of danger and chains, but the presence of choice, care, and trust. She was no longer the frightened, half-starved figure hiding in the shadows. She was alive, whole, and free. The man watched her with quiet pride. He knew that the journey was far from over, that trust and healing were ongoing processes. But he also knew that she had taken the most important step. She had allowed herself to believe in kindness, to accept help, and to embrace freedom. And for the first time in her life, she was not alone in this small house. On the edge of the town, the Vulpine girl had found something she had never known before: safety, care, and the ability to dream. Freedom was no longer an abstract idea, was her life, lived one gentle, meaningful day at a time. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with possibilities, where fear did not rule her every moment, and where she could finally be herself. The days grew warmer as the seasons shifted, and with the changing weather, the Vulpine girl's life continued to transform. What had begun as small steps, trusting the man, exploring the house, learning to eat and rest, had grown into larger strides. She moved with confidence now, her golden eyes bright with curiosity, and her ears alert but relaxed. The timid, frightened figure that had once crouched in a dusty shed was slowly disappearing. In her place was someone learning to live freely, to enjoy life, and to make choices for herself. The man had helped her find a rhythm to life. She woke each morning to the soft sounds of the town, the birds singing, and the warm sunlight spilling through the windows. Her first thought was no longer about survival or fear. Instead, she considered what she wanted to do with her day. She could eat when she wanted, explore when she wanted, and rest when she needed to. Every decision, no matter how small, was a step toward independence. The freedom she had once only dreamed of was now real, tangible, and in her hands. One morning, she decided to venture further than she ever had before. With the man walking beside her, she stepped out of the small yard and into the streets of the town. The market was alive with noise, the smell of fresh bread, and the chatter of merchants and children. In the past, she had hidden in shadows, afraid of every stranger. Today, she walked with her head held high, moving carefully but without fear. People noticed her, some curious, some surprised, but none threatened her. And for the first time she realized that she belonged in this world not as a shadow or a burden, but as herself, living, valued being. The man did not walk ahead or push her forward. He matched her pace, offering quiet encouragement when needed, but letting her make her own choices. She explored the market, stopping to watch children play, to sniff the fresh bread, and to watch the colorful cloths waving in the wind. Each new sight, sound, and smell was an adventure, not a danger. She felt alive in a way she had never known before. And in that aliveness, she began to understand that her life, her freedom, was hers to shape. Back at the house, she began to take charge of her daily routines. She prepared meals for herself and sometimes helped the man with simple tasks. She cleaned, organized, and tended to the small garden outside. Each task, though simple, gave her a sense of pride and accomplishment. She realized that she could provide for herself, that she could create a safe and welcoming space not only for herself, but for others if she wished. Every action reminded her that she was no longer dependent on fear or the mercy of strangers. She was her own person now, capable of creating her own life. As the weeks passed, the girl began to discover small joys she had never experienced before. She learned the pleasure of watching the sunrise, the comfort of a soft bed, and the taste of fresh, warm bread. She laughed quietly at small things, the playful chase of a butterfly in the garden, the gentle teasing of the man when she fumbled with a task, and the sound of birds singing outside the window. These small joys, once unimaginable, became her new reality. Each laugh, each smile, was a mark of healing and growth. A proof that freedom was not only about safety, but about living fully. The man continued to guide her gently. He spoke with her about the world, about kindness, about choices and consequences. He reminded her that freedom was not just being safe, but also being responsible and aware. Slowly, she began to understand the balance between independence and wisdom. She learned that while she could choose her path, she also had to be mindful of her surroundings and the people she encountered. This knowledge, combined with her growing strength and confidence, allowed her to navigate life with care and courage. One day, she met other children and young adults in the town. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if she could trust them or if they would hurt her as others had. But with encouragement, she approached slowly, observing and listening. She began to play small games with them, share stories, and even help with minor chores. Each interaction was a lesson in trust and communication. She discovered that not everyone in the world was cruel, and that friendships, however small, were possible. These connections gave her further confidence, showing her that her life could be rich with companionship and care. Over time, the girl's past became less of a burden and more of a foundation for growth. She remembered the fear, the hunger, and the loneliness. But instead of feeling trapped by them, she used them to appreciate her present. She realized that surviving her past had made her strong, resourceful, and compassionate. She began to understand that she could use her experiences to help others, to recognize suffering in the world, and to act with kindness. Her freedom was no longer just personal, it became something she could share with others through empathy and care. The man continued to support her, but he also stepped back when necessary, allowing her to make decisions and take responsibility for herself. He encouraged her to explore beyond the town, to visit the fields and forests nearby, and to see the world with curiosity and wonder. Each journey, each small adventure, strengthened her independence and self-confidence. She discovered that she could navigate the world, make choices, and care for herself. And in doing so, she felt a profound sense of joy and accomplishment. As the girl grew stronger and more confident, she began to think about her future. She wondered what kind of life she wanted to lead, what kind of person she wanted to become. For the first time, she realized that her future was not dictated by fear or the cruelty of others. She could choose her path, pursue her dreams, and create a life filled with meaning and purpose. This realization filled her with hope and determination. She knew that challenges would come, but she also knew that she had the strength, resilience, and freedom to face them. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned pink and gold, the girl sat quietly on the porch of the small house. She watched the world around her, feeling a sense of calm and belonging. The wind brushed against her fur, carrying the sense of the town, the fields, and the distant forests. She felt alive, whole, and free. She thought about how far she had come from a frightened, half-starved figure hiding in a dusty shed to someone capable of choosing, exploring, and dreaming. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought her to a life she could finally call her own. The man joined her on the porch, sitting quietly and watching her with gentle pride. He did not speak because words were unnecessary. The girl understood the depth of his support, his patience, and his care. She realized that freedom was not just about leaving a shed behind, It was about finding people who cared, learning to trust, and discovering one's own strength. She felt gratitude for the man, not as someone who had saved her, but as someone who had guided her gently toward a life she could choose for herself. Over time, the girl fully embraced her freedom. She explored more, played more, laughed more, and dreamed more. She continued to interact with the town, forming friendships and small connections that made her feel part of a community. She used her past not as a chain, but as a reminder of resilience, strength, and the importance of kindness. She understood that life was no longer about survival. Alone, it was about living fully, embracing freedom, and making choices that reflected her values and desires. In the quiet of the evenings, she often reflected on her journey. She remembered the fear, the loneliness, and the hunger. But she also remembered the first piece of bread, the first gentle words, and the first moments of trust. She realized that each small act of kindness had built the foundation for the life she now led. And she understood that freedom was not something that could be given once. It was something that grew with care, patience, and love. The story of the Vulpine girl concluded not with a dramatic event, but with the quiet triumph of a life reclaimed. She had been half-starved, neglected, and ignored, but through patience, care, and her own courage, she had grown into someone capable of living fully and freely. She had learned to trust, to explore, to dream, and to create a life of her own choosing. Her freedom was real, lasting, and meaningful, and in this quiet victory, she knew something profound. One act of kindness, one person willing to see her, had changed everything. Her life was hers, and for the first time, she felt a deep, lasting sense of belonging, safety, and hope.